Well, hello everybody, and on behalf of the Australasian College for Road Safety's Local Government Network, welcome to the July Showcase webinar. I might just give it a minute for the stragglers to dial in. So I'm going to turn my microphone off for the next minute and then we'll kick off. All right, well, let's kick off. Just went 2:01. So as I said, welcome to the July Showcase webinar. For those who don't know me, my name is Melanie Suter. I'm the chair of the Local Government Network. And in my day job, I'm the Road Safety Officer for Parks, Forbes and Lachlan Shire Councils, who are located pretty much smack bang in the middle of New South Wales in Australia. So welcome to those who are joining us for the first time, and a warm welcome back to our regular members. We are really pleased to bring you today's webinar, which showcases 3 local government projects from across 3 different jurisdictions in Australia. Next slide, please. So we're kicking off like we always do with a acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge and pay our respects to the many First Nations of Australia who continue to be the sovereign custodians of their countries and the sovereignty of the Maori in New Zealand. We acknowledge the ongoing traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, work and learn, and pay our respects to elders who have passed on the legacy of knowledge and culture to future generations. May this sharing of knowledge through Matarunga Maori and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of knowing, being and doing guide you with wisdom and courage as it enhances our collective futures. Next slide, please. So for those that are joining us for the first time, I just wanted to take a brief moment to talk about what the Local Government Network is. So we are all members of the Australasian College for Road Safety, and we either work directly for local government or we work for organisations that have an interest in what local government's doing in the road safety space. The network, we have about 100 members at the moment, and we are about connecting people and connecting the stories, like today with these 3 showcase webinars. We collaborate on ideas. We seek issues for help that you might be having with our open mic sessions. It's just about connecting those practitioners from right across Australia and New Zealand. Next slide, please. So housekeeping. So today we're going to run for around 60 minutes. This is being recorded and you will get a link to that recording if you want to watch this back. So we are going to hold questions until the end of the webinar where there'll be a Q&A with the panellists. So if you, next slide, Kate, I was going in front of myself. So if you do want to ask a question, you just pop it in the Q&A, which is down the bottom of your screen. If you have some more general type comments, that's what the chat's for. And I have asked our presenters to pop their details into the chat as well after they finish speaking. So we will try and get to as many of the questions as we can, but just a disclaimer, if we don't, please chase it up with the presenters if we didn't get to your specific question. Next slide, please. So just before we get to our 3 showcase case studies, we have an update from the team that are working on the network risk assessment framework project. So I'm just going to hand you over to Paul and Dale, who are working on that project. Paul, Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. Thanks for the welcome there. So, yeah, today we're providing a brief update on where we've got to with the Network Risk Assessment Framework project. Some of you may have been present when we first mentioned the start of the project at the end of March, I believe it was, and some of you may well have participated either in direct one-on-one surveys or provided some input to our online survey as well. That's been really, really helpful. Can't emphasise that enough in terms of helping us in the development of the framework. We're now at the stage where we have developed a framework and made some changes to it based on some feedback we've received, and we're going to share that with you today. And there's a short window of opportunity for LGN members to provide further comments. We would like to have given you longer, but I think the meeting got pushed back a little bit, so we can't afford for the overall project to slide. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Dale now, who will take you through the framework that we're proposing.
Thanks, Paul. Now I need to take control of the slides. I'm not seeing an option to do that. We talked about this beforehand, but
if you like, you can just tell me to
yeah, yes,
move
do that.
along.
Yep, yep. Thank you. Yep, next. Yep, next one. We've talked about that. So what we want to do today is distill a lot of information into a very quick 10-minute presentation. So bear with us. There's a lot of content here to look at. We will be sharing these slides after the webinar, and there will be a short survey to give feedback. So we won't be taking Q&A on this particular topic. For those of you not familiar with this project, it is to support the National Road Safety Action Plan, where the federal government has an action to lead the development of a framework to support local governments conduct fit-for-purpose road safety risk assessments. Next slide. A key part of what we're asked to deliver is to define what fit-for-purpose means in the local government context. And the very big picture view is it's a combination of what best practices in risk assessment, what your local government context looks like, and if there's any requirements in your state or territory to do a particular type of assessment or to deliver an assessment in a particular way. But the key point we want to point out is that if you are a local government doing a network risk assessment, that assessment or the type of assessment you pick should match the scale of the trauma in your area and the expected level of infrastructure investment. For example, you're not going to do a very expensive, highly detailed, highly specialised assessment on a road network that has very little fatal and serious injury overall, or where it's so low volume and so remote that the only treatments might be things like speed management or maintenance. Next slide. We spoke to local governments across Australia and came up with these are the things that determine what type of risk assessment a particular local government might consider. I talked about the scale of the fatal and serious injury problem in that area. The network, we have sealed networks, unsealed networks, rural networks, urban networks, high volume networks, low volume networks. And every local government has different capability and capacity to do these assessments, and that's for a range of reasons like the availability of skilled staff to do the work and what support you might be getting from other organisations. Next slide. Part of what we've had to do is look at what's been in use currently. So the green boxes there are what we call proactive risk assessments. So using information about the road and roadside to assess the risk of a road. And then in yellow, sorry, those colours look different in the slides we had originally, but that's okay. In yellow, that's around using crash data, which is also a way that you can assess risk. We found that a really good way to sort of group the different types of assessment methods is to create tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So tier 1 assessments are where you're getting right into that high level of detail, 100-metre segments. You're going to have to put in 50 or more inputs. You're probably going to have some very specialised staff or certification to do the assessment. But in turn, you're going to have really good predictive capability and really robust outputs is what you need. If you're doing more transformational or more expensive road safety treatments, you need that level of detail. The intermediate range is sort of in the middle by having fewer attributes and longer corridors, but still looking at it at a corridor by corridor basis to assess risk. And then at the basic level, these are your sorts of roads where there's almost not much point in doing any level of detailed assessment because crashes are generally very sporadic and random, and just looking at corridor by corridor, site by site, you may end up with an entire network that's 1 star or low risk and IRR. There is a tool in Western Australia, the LG stars, which does work quite well for those very basic assessments, but otherwise we're suggesting more of an approach using crash data at a network level to understand your systemic risks across your network rather than getting right down to that nitty-gritty of site-by-site assessment. If you click again, that little bar at the bottom just shows that how those different methods will align to the scale of investment that you might have in road safety on your road network. Next slide, please. So we then had to kind of marry up the two in terms of what does your road network look like and what is the best sort of risk assessment method. And what we're suggesting is that those advanced methods you would apply to roads with a high strategic function, all the way down to your low strategic function roads with some suggested methodologies. That idea of the strategic function of your road, we have some ideas around what that might be, for example, linking it to movement in place categories, But realistically, we hope that the state and territories, if they are wanting to be involved, will set or define what those categories might be, and potentially even support, the rollout of assessments for those types of roads. For example, if you have a very high movement function, or a connector road, arterial regional roads, they are the ones that are going to be more suited to those more advanced assessment methods. That said, we recognise every local government is different, and they're in a different stage in this type of thinking. Therefore, if you have roads where an OSRAP assessment might be appropriate, but you don't have the skills, the capability, the money to do that, then it's fine to step it down a level and pick the next type of assessment and try that one. It's a very flexible, pragmatic framework that we want to develop. There might also be situations where you might have roads that are classified as a low or moderate strategic function, but they have something unusual. Maybe the community is complaining, or there's activity peaking at different times of the year. Again, you might want to lift those up a level and give them a more detailed assessment. The next slide, please. And looking at those existing methods, there's three major crash types that we see on local government networks: the high-speed lane departure, vulnerable road users, and at intersections. And proactive methods are really good at predicting risk in that top category. So rural roads, generally high-speed roads where you have head-on and run-off road crashes. They are okay, but not great at predicting risk for vulnerable road users in intersections. And that's a wee bit problematic where you have local government road networks, such as in a metro, where almost all your FSI is in that bottom area. If you click, is there a box? Or maybe it's hidden in the screen. Oh, yep, you could just make that out. So we're going to come up with a couple of interim approaches for those types of networks, either using modified crash analysis, or by focusing on prioritising locations where you have lots of vulnerable road users and high vehicle speeds, because we know that's where a lot of your risk on those inner metro areas is going to be. Next, please. So a bit of a, if you're a local government and you are on the journey of doing this yourself, check whether your state territory requires or needs a specific method. I know, for example, in Victoria, all the roads have been assessed using IRR, and that may be sufficient in that area. So always make sure you follow what your state or territory is asking for. Otherwise, you might end up with an assessment that doesn't match funding criteria. There's a bit of a step where you need to understand what systemic risks are on your road network and consider whether you might be in that situation with a lot of intersection FSI or vulnerable road users, and bear that in mind if you're picking any of these particular techniques. Consider your network characteristics and identify what might be tier 1, 2, or 3. And then do that kind of pragmatic, consistent check. If most of your network's in one category, then it's probably okay to apply that whole approach across all your road network. And sometimes, data on road classifications is often out of date or inaccurate. So always binding in that local knowledge and judgment to adjust those tiers if you need to. Next. Now, I've put a lot of information in those slides, and there's a lot more sort of thinking in behind that, and our output, our report to the Commonwealth will provide a lot more detail on some of those areas. But at this initial stage, if you are able to provide feedback, we'd really love that. We're going to send out the slides and a very short survey after the webinar asking these 3 questions. We have a really tight turnaround to get feedback by the end of business Wednesday next week, but really appreciate any feedback, good or bad, that you can give us on this framework we've come up with. So thanks, that's all I had.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Dale, and thanks, Paul, for popping in and giving us an update on that project. And we will make sure that we get those slides and the webinar, the Q&A out to all the members and everyone that signed up for today too.
Thanks, Melanie.
All right, let's get into the showcase. So let me introduce you to our first presenter. This is David Fulton, who's the Senior Engineer at Bundaberg Regional Council, and a great follow-on from that update on network risk assessments. David's going to be talking about the Network Safety Plan at Bundaberg Regional Council. So David, over to you.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Melanie, and good afternoon, everyone. I've just requested Control Kate of the slides. Has that come through? There we go. Perfect. So yeah, this afternoon, I'm just going to present a very brief overview of the Network Safety Plan that Bundaberg Regional Council has developed in partnership with the National Transport and Research Organisation, NTRO. Very relevant to what we just heard from both Dale and Paul, so I was very interested to hear that. I'll just highlight that this presentation does focus on the process that we've followed to develop the network safety plan and not so much the outcome itself. So just a bit of a brief outline of what I'm going to talk about this afternoon. So first of all, what is a network safety plan? Then why undertake a network safety plan? I guess I'm answering this specifically from the point of view of Bundaberg Regional Council, why we undertook one. Then the network safety plan process that we followed, which is, I guess, the main purpose of today's presentation. And then finally, some key takeaways, lessons learned. And then, as we've already heard, there's an opportunity for Q&A at the end of this webinar. And I just would like to acknowledge from the outset the contribution from the NTRO team, Emily McLean, Melanie Venter, and David McTiernan. Those guys really did pretty well all the grunt work in terms of developing the network safety plan. So many thanks to them. So what is a network safety plan? So the National Road Safety Action Plan provides a definition, which I've got on the screen there. So it's an assessment of the road safety risk across a road network, supplemented by the assessment of benefits against the costs of specific road safety interventions to reduce that risk. And the output of a network safety plan is an investment plan which can be budgeted for and implemented as funds become available. So some key points from that definition, which I have bolded there, is that firstly, a network safety plan is risk-based. So it's proactive. It's also network focused, the costs and benefits are quantified, and the final output is a prioritised investment plan, so highly practical for local governments. So why undertake a network safety plan, and why did we as Bundaberg Regional Council undertake a network safety plan? So first of all, we wanted to adopt a proactive approach to road safety. So like many other local governments, our history is very much anchored in a reactive approach to road safety investment, where we've reacted to observe crashes on the road network. So we wanted to flip that on its head and at least consider a proactive approach. We also wanted to develop a network perspective and maximise the safety benefits across the whole network. So again, similar to other local governments, we've very much focused on individual projects in the past and, you know, making those projects as safe as possible, which is great. But often the safest project outcome doesn't align with the safest network outcome. So we wanted to adopt that higher level perspective, that helicopter view of the network. We also wanted to demonstrate achievement of the safest road network within council's funding constraints, which I guess is probably a common goal amongst many road authorities. We also wanted to align with the national and state road safety targets and demonstrate our contribution towards these targets. And then finally, developing a network safety plan, we see it as an opportunity to leverage future funding opportunities as we're seeing increasing amounts of funding linked to road safety risk assessments, and programs like the Black Spot program are already starting to incorporate a proactive element to them. So this is shown on the left-hand side there is the network safety plan process that was developed by NTRO as part of this project. And each of these points I'm going to go into in a bit more detail in the coming slides. But the first step in the network safety plan process that we followed, and I should highlight that this is just one way to achieve that network safety plan outcome. There may be other ways to achieve that same outcome, but I guess we hope that this serves as a model or a guide or an example that other local governments may be able to follow. So yes, the first step in the process was to understand the current safety state. Then we set a safety target, which we've termed the corridor safety vision. So then comparing the current safety state and our safety target allowed us to identify what the safety gaps were. We then identified treatments to treat these safety gaps, and that led to the development of an infrastructure safety program. And we then went through a process, or we're currently in the midst of it now, of reviewing and refining that safety target policy to a point of affordability so that it's actually achievable. So the first step, as I mentioned, is to understand the current safety state. And we mainly went about that using an OSRAP and ANRAM assessment of all the sealed roads and major unsealed roads on our network. So that equates to about 2,170 kilometres of road. So we have a fairly large network. Now, for the sake of time and simplicity, I'll leave ANRAM alone, but I'm assuming that probably there's quite a few people on the webinar who might be familiar with OSRAP, but for those who aren't familiar with OSRAP, it's proactive network level infrastructure risk assessment tool. So for each 100-metre segment on our road network, there were 78 infrastructure attributes which were coded, and these attributes are known to impact the crash likelihood and severity. And so by coding each of these 78 attributes, it then translates into a 1 to 5 star rating system, where 1 star is the least safe road and 5-star road is the most safe road. And as shown in the little graph there in the bottom right-hand corner, each incremental improvement in star rating, the research shows that leads to a halving in the risk of death or serious injury. And in terms of a target, the United Nations Global IRAP target is 3 stars, and that's just seen as a target which is achievable, rather than gold plating everything and aiming for the 5-star target. So an example of how the OSRAP model works, and this is an example road from within the Bundaberg region. So shown on the screen there is a selection of the attributes which are coded on this road. So for instance, the road is nice and straight. There is a centre line marked, and the road appears to be in good condition. However, there's no shoulders on either side, and there's hazards in close proximity to the carriageway edge. And it's also a high-speed road with a speed limit of 100 kilometres an hour. So these attributes, amongst others, translate into a 1-star road. So this is the least safe type of road under the OSRAP model. So the second step in the network safety plan process was to set a safety target, or a corridor safety vision. And we initially set this target that all new roads would be 3 stars or better. And then in terms of the existing road network, that we would target 80% of travel on 3-star or better roads. And this target was set so that it aligned with higher level strategic documents, such as the United Nations Decade of Action for Road Safety, and also the National Road Safety Strategy. So to ensure that all new roads achieve this standard of 3 stars or better, we went about reviewing our current road typical cross-sections. So we reviewed those and made changes to them to ensure that we were able to achieve this target of 3 stars or better for all road users, and according to the movement of place classification as well. So once we'd refined these cross-sections to a point where they achieved that 3-star or better target, we then used these cross-sections and compared them to the existing road network to identify where the safety gaps were. And an example of how this process went, again, this is an example road from within the Bundaberg region, and the corridor safety vision, or the safety target for this road, is shown in the top right-hand corner there. So the OSRAP attributes that align with that corridor safety vision are shown in green, and the attributes which don't align, or the safety gaps, are shown in red. So for example, there's a centre line and the traffic lanes appear to be wide enough, and on one side of the road, the hazards are far enough away from the carriageway. However, on the other side, we have close roadside hazards. There's also no edge lines on this road, and the speed limit is higher than desirable. So they're the safety gaps. And then what we did was identify treatments which would treat these safety gaps. So for instance, where there's no shoulder, we might apply a widening treatment. Where there's no edge lines, we might undertake delineation improvements. Roadside clearing, where we have roadside hazards in close proximity to the carriageway, and a speed limit reduction to address the high speed limit. Oh, next slide. So all of these treatments were then grouped into mass action style work programs. So delineation, road widening, roadside clearing and protection, speed management, and intersection upgrades. And so a cost was applied to each of these treatments, and then the impact of these treatments were reanalyzed using the OSRAP and ANRAM models to identify, the improvement in star rating and reduction in FSIs. So this table here, this presents basically all of the identified safety gaps and corresponding treatments across the network. So we've got the different mass action work programs on the left-hand side, the estimated costs, FSI saved, the project benefit, BCR, and then the percent travel achieved on 3-star or better roads. And what I would like to highlight is the total cost there, 1.7 billion. So that just highlights, the extent of the safety gaps across the network. However, that is all of the safety gaps. I just want to point that out. But once we basically prioritise each of the individual treatments against one another, that then allows us to, and on the next slide, it's coming. So once we prioritise each of the individual treatments against one another, this then allows us to define what is the cost to achieve our target of 80% of travel on 3-star or better roads. And so this is where we're at the moment. This is sort of the loose end we're just trying to tie up at the moment. But once we define the cost and we define an investment time frame, say it might be 10 or 20 years, we can then work through with our council a review and refine process where we determine whether or not that is affordable, whatever that cost is. And if it's not, then we go through a process of refining that safety target and again, defining the cost and seeking to achieve a point of affordability so that we have a defined investment timeframe and it's something that's achievable. Next slide. And so some key takeaways and lessons learnt from our network safety plan is that low-cost treatments applied en masse likely deliver the greatest benefit to the entire road network. Achieving the National Road Safety Strategy targets on local government road networks is going to require significant investment that's beyond current funding levels. And that's probably no surprise to anyone. Then also, it was interesting that Dale touched on this, that there's potentially improvements required to proactive risk assessments for intersections. So just to highlight that point, there's only 5 OSRAP attributes that relate to intersections out of those 78 attributes. And just to highlight that point further, in terms of the Bundaberg Road network, there's only 14% of travel in urban areas that's on roads that are less than 3 stars. So that's 14% of travel on roads that we would say are unsafe according to the OSRAP model. However, these roads however, urban areas account for 67% of all FSI crashes on our network, and then 45% of those are intersection crashes. So I definitely agree that there's some improvements in that proactive space for intersections. And then finally, accurate OSRAP coding is essential. That's the foundation of the building blocks for the network safety plan as we undertook it. So it's important to get that right to avoid issues down the track. And yeah, that's me done. Just trying to flick to the final slide. So thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So I'll get David to pop his email address in the chat if any of you want to chase him up. And remember, if you've got a question that you'd like to put to David, if you could put that in the Q&A, that would be amazing. Next slide, please, Kate. We'll keep moving along. Where's Kate still there? Thank you. Okay, so our second speaker, sort of sticking with this proactive theme that we've got going today, is Adam Malarchik, who's the Section Manager for Engineering Certification at Central Coast Council in New South Wales. So Adam, I will pass over to you.
Thanks, Mel. Got some IT problems at the moment, so I've got 2 cameras and none of them are working, but hopefully the slides will work. Okay. The screens are not working at the moment.
Would you like Kate to drive it for you?
Yeah, it doesn't seem
Want me
to
to
be
drive it,
working.
Adam?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Kate, thanks.
Yep. Okay, it's saying that I'm still waiting for you to control my screen.
You got that now?
Screen sharing, yeah. What does that say? Oh, golly gee, what have I done? Yeah, is that right?
Good. Road safety and planning, local roads and new subdivisions. Next slide, please, Kate. So why bother about road safety when planning new subdivisions? If you can click the
Sorry,
next.
yep, sorry.
You're right. Because thousands of kilometres of new roads and developments are created from new subdivisions each and every year. The extract up there in the top right, New South Wales councils had 11,000 kilometres of new roads in their networks over 10 years. That's over 1,000 Ks each and every year to the New South Wales network, and many thousands of kilometres to the networks across Australia and New Zealand. And why we bother about it? Because almost 40% of all fatalities occur on local roads of 70 kilometres and less, and more than half of all reported crashes occur on local roads. Next button, there's an example of a crash map from the subdivision. As you can see, far too many crashes and even some fatalities. Next slide, please, Kate. Lost roads. Safe system in the planning process states good planning and design sets the foundation for a safe road environment. Some of those graphics there show that the probability of survival of various crash types varies at different speeds, and I wanted to highlight the lower speeds. We've got a 10% chance of survival of a pedestrian hit by a vehicle at 50 k's an hour, and only a 20% chance of survival of a near-side side impact crash, vehicle crash. We want to ensure that any crashes that do occur do not result in fatal or serious injury, and that we do not contribute to avoidable road trauma. We also know safe system is a shared responsibility, meaning all involved, including the planners, share that responsibility. And when dealing with developers and consultants, we can share in that and say that they form part of this shared responsibility, and that it's a reflection on them as well. Next slide, please, Kate. This case study goes through the whole development process, right from the start of the rezoning of the land to the occupation of the dwellings. And it's basically relating to the road safety aspects. And that's probably over about a 12-year period. So starting with the master plan, as you can see on the right side of the screen there, this proposal will ultimately double the size of that suburb. The original proposal presents many undesirable road attributes, and they can increase crash risk. These were identified through an informal road safety assessment, and we were looking at the areas of increased crash risk, mostly ones that can be easily mitigated. Through this assessment, we can explain how and why there was increased crash risk, so there is a better understanding of, by the planners, the consultants, and the developers. Next slide, please, Kate. This identifies numerous four-way uncontrolled intersections. These have significant numbers of conflicts, and by introducing a different road layout, like staggered T intersections, we can significantly reduce conflict points. Next slide, Kate. We've got 4 intersections that were originally proposed onto an adjoining road, and this existing road has unsuitable geometry to introduce 4 intersections, and this road was also a higher speed road with a known crash history. Very often we have found that people that come up with these master plans, landscape architects or other people, don't appreciate the complexities of putting intersections in certain locations or even developing appropriate road layouts. Next slide, please, Kate. As you can see, we've got long lengths of roads that don't have many intersections. These are also down a very steep grade. If you can see the contours on there, these roads, some of them are over 500 metres long, and these long steep roads promote unintentional speeding, also increased speeding at conflict points and mobility issues. Next slide, please, Kate. So all these attributes are only some of the issues that we identified through the assessment. Others include intersections over crests where no slight distance is provided, combined horizontal and vertical geometry, increasing runoff road crashes, even at very low speeds, and undesirable locations for pedestrian and cycle connections. Next slide, please, Kate. The flawed master plan was totally revised with the majority of the issues addressed, resulting in this new layout, as you can see there. This revised master plan, together with some other planning controls that were imposed, formed the basis of the planning controls for the development applications. Next slide, please, Kate. The development control plan included the following, and these are extracts from the DCP that was developed for this site. And if you just click through there, Kate, there's quite a few, and these all reinforce the requirements for safe road design and for safe road users and safe systems, and that was embedded throughout the DCP for that site. The development approval includes conditions of consent after assessment of the development application, and that also includes assessment of the traffic impact assessment. Our standard planning controls include conditions of consent. One is an extract below, which is for a detailed design or a pre-construction road safety audit, and it identifies prior to the Roads Act works or the subdivision work certificate. A detailed design road safety audit for the project needs to be prepared by minimum level 2 and level 3 road safety auditor registered on the New South Wales Register of Road Safety Auditors. The audit is supposed to be submitted to council, and no recommendations to be made in the audit to address any of the deficiencies. Resolutions of the identified deficiencies are to be carried out in consultation with council, and council will sign off on the corrective actions prior to issue of the approvals. To the right-hand side, that's an extract out of our civil works specification, and it shows our road safety audit page, or pages is another one there, and that is about 11, 12 years old now. It needs updating, but it shows an intervention level table for road safety audits, and at the time we put in also road safety checks for minor developments. Next page, please, Kate. These are some of the documents in the road safety audit process. On the left-hand side there is the detailed design road safety audit for stage 4 of this subdivision. The top in the middle is the treatments that were agreed upon after meetings to address some of the findings in the audit, and the email there with some of the issues that we looked at, including agreement of treatments to address some of the findings. Next page, please. The subdivision work certificate, I should have mentioned it earlier, there's a New South Wales planning terminology, and the subdivision work certificate is the detailed engineering design for the subdivision works. And these include the road and intersection design, geometry, drainage, pavements, path systems, street lighting, and so on. So the subdivision work certificate engineering design included all the road safety outcomes that were settled through the initial master plan assessment, the revised master plan, the development of the planning controls, the DA assessment, which included a review of the traffic impact assessment. And traffic impact assessments, by the way, is supposed to include a road safety assessment, but majority don't. They just include a crash map, and they call that their safety assessment. The DA conditions that included the compliance with council civil works specs, and also the provision of pre-construction and post-construction road safety audits, the road safety audit closeouts, and the detailed designs that was prepared as a result of all those documents. On a personal observation, I'd like to make, sorry, Kate, just say that many consultants and even planners think that they can use a traffic engineer, and they do all the related traffic issues. But I find that my view that traffic engineers, design engineers, road safety engineers, transport planners, active transport consultants, and so on are not interchangeable, but they all contribute in some ways to improved road safety outcomes. I'll just go on to this page, top left. corner is a crash map of the new subdivision. As you can see, 0 crashes, although it's early days too, 4.5 years since we released the first lots for that subdivision. The middle top, as you can see, there's a crash map with numerous crashes around that bend. This bend initially had no houses fronting it and a safety barrier protecting runoff road crashes from entering the vacant land. As we had to provide new houses and new dwellings in there, we had to remove the safety barrier, and we looked at the cause of the runoff road crashes, not the protection of the crashes occurring. So we introduced on the two pictures on the right-hand side, slow points or traffic calming devices for the entry into that curve. And if you can see back over onto the crash map, you can see that curve there, and there's no crashes since they were installed. Bottom left-hand side is actually that new subdivision and a recent near maps. And as you can see, there's a significant amount of dwellings in that site, more than 250 dwellings occupied already, and it's still under construction. So there's a lot of traffic now using that area. But as I said, with 0 crashes reported. Next slide, please, Kate. Takeaways. Early intervention is critical. Initial road safety assessments can eliminate the majority and main safety issues. This significantly reduces and delays costs further in the process, where there can be opposition and difficulties getting changes even after road safety assessments to the project. We can end up with poor mitigation treatments that may only address some of the aspects. Number 2, we need to apply all the safety assessments throughout the process. You will get more and more complete road safety outcomes, as occasionally some issues do get missed through a process, but where multiple processes apply, this can eliminate the Swiss cheese effect and builds redundancy into the system. Number 3, ensure that strategic development planners are on board. They understand their roles. You can bring them on board and say that they can contribute to improving road safety. And lastly, a significant amount of road trauma can be avoided if we use the tools available to us. We know there's numerous tools out there that we can use, and we cannot contribute to avoidable road trauma. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. That was great. So I'll get you to pop your contact deets in the chat if anyone wants to reach out with more questions. And if you do have a question for Adam, please pop it in the Q&A. So we'll keep moving. Our final speaker for today is Melanie Peterson, who's the Road Safety Education Officer for the City of Casey Council in Victoria. Melanie is going to be talking about a new school build and the process that the council went through. Melanie, over to you.
Thanks, Melanie. So, Kate, I believe I've asked for control.
Yes, you've got it.
Oh, okay. My arrows aren't working. There we go. Might have pressed too many too quickly. So thank you. Yes, I'm going to be talking about a new school build. And I really want to acknowledge that I'm just the presenter and I'm presenting a whole range of work from a range of other teams within the City of Casey. Just to give you some context with the City of Casey, so we are an outer southeastern suburb of Melbourne. We're the second fastest growing LGA in Victoria. So if that gives you some sense of how quickly we're growing. As you can see there, large number of residents, but also a large number of families and we're very diverse in both our countries of residence, our countries of origin and our faiths. And as an outlying and fast growing community, there is a really high dependence on cars in the City of Casey as well. So just to show you the school build that we're talking about and the location, so it's located in a suburb called Clyde North, which is a major growth area for us. Now in Victoria, and I'm not sure about other states and areas, but in Victoria, the Minister for Education is exempt from obtaining planning permits for government schools. And so in growth areas such as this, what that can mean is that schools are being built and going in years ahead of the original timelines that councils are aware of. And it means that there's limited infrastructure in place around the school site. And so with our families, particularly those that have not yet moved into that estate, it will be a long drive to school due to the single access point. And think we're moving ahead on my screens. Anyway, due to the single access point, and there's a lot of congestion in the area as well. Seems like I'm lagging in my screen here.
Yeah.
Not sure what's happening with this, Kate. I don't know whether it might be worth I'm just getting a real lag.
Waiting for Melody Peterson, control your screen. Can you apply again?
Oh, I've just given up control. Let me try again.
I'm up. Yep. Okay.
No, I'm going to give it back to you, Kate. It's just
Try that. All right.
No, if that's okay, I'll get you to control because it's just lagging, not doing. So if you can move to the next one, please.
Yep.
So that was that. We can move on again. Okay, so this is the site at which we became involved, which was in August 2023. And so the road safety issues were fairly clear. So we've got 3 bordering roads around this school. 1 is not yet built and 2 are no-through roads. So there's clearly also a lack of existing infrastructure, footpaths, crossing points, all of those. We've got ongoing heavy construction vehicles in the area, and the school was to open at the end of January 2024, and ongoing construction would be in the area for foreseeable future. Obviously, the changing nature of the road network is going to keep occurring. And if you see along the bottom of that picture, there's nowhere for vehicles to turn along the school frontage. Sorry, Kate, if you can just go back. The future planning catered for all of this. However, the incomplete construction means that, you know, there's inadequate facilities for the immediate need. That's okay, just run with it. Okay, so one of the key things for us was engagement. So we engaged with the principal 5 months prior to the school opening. And so the Safe Around Schools team that I'm involved in, we initiated a meeting with the principal to talk about student numbers, potential issues and communication needs. And so our team would liaise with the internal council teams in blue there, and then the external players in green. And then with the principal, we determined that early engagement with the families was key. So we saw an opportunity to kind of build the road safety considerations into the other school orientation information. So before the school opened. Next slide, please. So the interventions. So from a council perspective, we, given that there was a no-through road on the school frontage along the bottom, we had a temporary turning point installed along with signage and road marking. There was obviously liaison between the estate developer, Victorian School Build Authority, traffic engineering, school crossings team to plan the crossing points, the line marking and the signage. We engaged with the school community before the school opened. So we provided a parking map, we attended the parent information night, and we attempted to kind of get that message across about developing a strong road safety culture and remind the parents that predominantly they're going to be the only vehicles in the area. The Safe Around Schools team that I'm in, we also attended on the first week of term 1 just to engage with parents on site, distribute some more printed information, observe behaviour and identify issues. The VSBA installed a raised wombat crossing at the school entrance, which was fantastic. And the developer also had temporary measures, including kind of barriers and line marking. So our ongoing pain points. So while we do have 2 raised shared user paths and 1 raised wombat in the area, driver awareness of the road rules surrounding this is quite low. And as you can see with the green tree, there is a reserve that will be built there, but obviously it's nowhere near ready, and there's no linking path from the school along that east side of the road. The current pram crossing is there, but it's just a pram crossing, so it doesn't have pedestrian priority. The area marked with the red cross, we've got repeated requests from the school and the families to install a crossing point here. But given the location of it, and given that really parents are only crossing across to their parked cars, that's going to be difficult. It would not meet the warrants for a supervised school crossing, and a wombat crossing wouldn't be suitable. So in a nutshell, this school has 3 priority access points. Sorry, Kate, can you just go back? I know it's doing some weird on its own timing thing. So in a nutshell, the school has 3 priority access points currently for pedestrians, and none of them are particularly user-friendly for the foreseeable future. And on the west side of the school, we've got our cultural heritage overlay, and that's resulted in us not being able to construct a footpath on the west side of the road. Well, this is not happy, is it? That's all right. You're getting a sneak peek into my next slides. So we've got a gravel path because we can't install a concrete footpath one. Yeah, I can't actually see the arrows. Thank you from Keith, but I can't actually see the arrows. I think, Kate, you're the only one that can see those on that screen share. You can't just go previous?
No.
On the,
There we have to do that. Sorry.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you. So then we've got the blue dot, which is the temporary painted roundabout. Now, we knew that wasn't going to be ideal because the road width was too narrow, and it requires the vehicles to do a 3-point turn. So that's caused confusion. There's been non-compliance, those sorts of things. However, it did provide an option for drivers to turn around safely if followed correctly. And then obviously the school parents are still having to mix with construction vehicles in the area. We can go to the next one, Kate. So what were our lessons learned? Okay, so it wasn't really a lesson for us, but we certainly learnt that short-term engineering fixes can't solve the problems associated with delayed infrastructure. So, you know, the school was opened ahead of the development of the whole area, and we can only do short-term fixes. Council had to balance kind of the Department of Transport and Planning's recommendations and guidelines along with the Department of Education's decision to open the school in advance. So, you know, for example, the low pedestrian and vehicular movement meant that supervised crossings were not warranted. The speed zone guidelines by DTP meant that before any other sort of activators along that road, we wouldn't be able to apply for a permanent 40k limit. So any changes also needed to be temporary because they'd have to be reversed. So that's why we had, you know, we had temporary speed limits via a traffic management plan. We had the temporary painted turning area in the roundabout. The other thing which, you know, happens everywhere, but most of the interventions actually rely on drivers and pedestrians behaving in the correct manner. So some of those are not doing that, obviously, and despite the fact that we distribute a range of information electronically, in person, in a range of languages, in a range of mediums, and we engage really early, we're still seeing some of that concerning pedestrian and driver behaviour that we see elsewhere as well. I guess the irony in this one is that we have school families complaining to council and to the school about the behaviour of the drivers and pedestrians, who are really also only the school families as well. There's very, you know, the construction traffic even avoids the area in school peak times. So really it's one lot of families complaining about the behaviour of other lot of families. So, you know, that it makes it difficult and it certainly pushes our focus on education. The early engagement and ongoing communication between the school and council was extremely important and valuable. And so while the opening of the school wasn't as smooth as what we'd hoped, engaging with the school leadership early enabled us to form a relationship with them, and it also provided the school and the families with contact points at council. And collaboration was the most successful element and the biggest challenge. So collaborative work between the various council teams, making sure that we were all on the same page, communicating the same messages to the school, those sorts of things worked really well. But then ensuring that communication and collaboration between all the council departments, the estate developer, the VSBA, school leadership, the school community was a constant challenge, and especially given the rate and the variety of construction happening in the area as well. Next one, Kate, thank you. So as you can see, other than develop on the actual school site, there's been no real change to the surrounding area. So that picture from May this year was 9 months down the track from the original picture, and the surrounding infrastructure still remains unchanged. So that is going to be a continuing issue. That's the end. So you can hit to the next one, Kate, but that's the end of our presentation, and we'll still be around for questions, and I'll pop my details in the chat as well. Thank you so much, Kate.
Oh, thank you so much, Melanie and Kate, and thank you everybody for dealing with us as we have some tech dramas today. I will invite the panelists to turn their cameras back on. Haven't got a lot of questions in the Q&A, so if you do have a question for one of the panelists, please pop it in there. David, you've got the first one. How did you determine the road widths, shoulder widths in your study? Did you conduct physical measurements, or was it estimated based off available asset data?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we determined the road and shoulder widths through the OSRAP assessment, which was done using video data of the entire road network. So coincidentally, we had NTRO also do our condition assessments of our entire road network, which collected video data, and then they used their Hawkeye tool, I believe, which is calibrated such that they can measure off the video the traffic lane and shoulder widths, which is then populated in the OSRAP model.
Cool, thank you. Adam, a question for you. Does council have, I know you had a thing in the slide, does council have a policy, I guess, about when road safety audits and other interventions would those sort of investigations would happen when projects are happening?
Yes, Mel. That little intervention table that's in our civil works specification actually identifies, and it's similar to the old Transport for New South Wales one, it identifies type of developments and the cost of those works I suppose, and it goes through new developments, intersections, refuges, roadworks, master planning too, because we're trying to cater for the whole planning process as well as the works. So that intervention table that I showed in the slides provides that at the moment. But I want to refine that and upgrade it to make it a bit more appropriate than what it, because that table's quite dated. So.
Thanks, Adam. Melanie, one for you. What are the approximate active travel to school rates for your case study school?
Very little would be the short answer there. Because of some of the issues around it still being kind of construction zone around the actual school, kind of linking footpaths and things like that. While they are there, they're being interrupted, I guess, by the building, traffic and things around it. So very low. While the school has a lot of options and some great pathways within the actual estate, just that final connection bit between the estate and the school is stopping that.
Okay, conscious of time, so I'm just going to throw to each of you to say if you had tips for a council that was going, I'm going to pick up your project and run with it, or something like that, what would your tips be? David, you can go first.
Tips for if they wanted to implement a network safety plan. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Sorry, you put me on the spot.
Do you want me to go to Adam first? I'm sure he's
that sounds good.
Adam, what would be your tips be around development planning?
Early intervention. Start with the master plans, rezonings, and get as much embedded early on in the process too. You can pick up little bits later on, but I think you get the biggest fish early on.
Awesome. Melanie's nodding because she's going to say the same thing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, ideally, things would go to plan and the schools would be built at the original plans and things like that. But I think the key really has been engagement. I think that's the biggest tip. It hasn't been a smooth process for us, but we have had continual engagement with the school. We have contacts. We know, the school knows who to ring when they're having an issue or when, first day happens. So I think that the engagement has been really key.
Awesome. Back to you, Deb. I mean, maybe who was the driver at council to get it off the ground, I guess?
Well, the infrastructure planning team and just trying to adopt that proactive approach. But I guess my tip would be try and reach a point of affordability. There's no point having a plan that isn't achievable. So, and I guess that's what we're in the midst of now, is refining it so that, we can actually implement this and measure its success over time. So, make sure it's achievable.
Oh, thank you. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up because, I've got a few things to tell you, LGN business and whatnot. So thanks to all of our presenters today for coming along and sharing your case study. I know it is a bit of work to pull all of that together. And for those of you that are on the line, if you've got a case study that you'd like to share with the network, please reach out to us. Also wanted to plug next month, we've got an open mic session for LGN members. That's on the 14th of August. So it's floating around in your inbox so that you can register for that and ask for help from other members. And then in September, we will have another one of these webinars where we'll be showcasing the work of 3 councils across Australia and New Zealand. And thanks to Dale and Paul for dialing in and giving us an update on the network safety plan framework project, and we will get those documents out to you so that you can provide some feedback before the deadline, which is next Wednesday. So right on time, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for your time today, and we will see you at the next meeting. Cheers.